Hello, everyone. This is Frank Favaro, and I am your host today of The People Business. And this is our first episode back after the new year. So happy new year, everyone. It's 2022. Hard to believe. It's crazy. 2022. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, how did 2021 just fly by? But it did. And, I think we got a lot going on in the world today. I've got my friend, my teammate, former teammate, Clint Musser on with me, joining me on The People Business. He is a phenomenal person, one of the greatest wrestlers to come out of Northeast Ohio in the last 25 years, but even a better human being. Clint, welcome to the program, man.
Thanks, Frank. Great to be here.
Yeah.
Great to see you, buddy. And I love what you're doing with this, and it's good to be here with you today.
Thank you. So we've got a lot to talk about because Clint, for those of you who don't know Clint is at the elite level of wrestling, of collegiate wrestling. At one point in time, he was at an elite level of international wrestling as a competitor, and now he is a coach. And when I bring coaches onto this show, it's because I think whether you're leading a team of a collegiate team in athletics or you're leading a team in business, it's really the same thing. You have to get the buy-in of your people. You have to motivate and inspire, and you have to make great decisions, right? So when it comes to Clint, he is just the perfect person to help us because he's dealing with so much in the college scene and trying to get his guys to get out there and compete every single week. And we were just talking about it off the air with how things are today with COVID and competition, and they're all over the place. So what's going on right now in the landscape of college athletics and getting you out, getting your team out there and competing?
Well, I appreciate that, Frank. And, just like everybody else, we're trying to work through this too. But, the landscape, it is tremendously difficult right now. I was mentioning with you, we've dealt with a couple shutdowns on our team because of COVID outbreaks. And not just that, we're, really, I think the real issue at this point is, this is the third straight season that our athletes have been affected by COVID, right? Like, when it came out, in 2020, they shut down the NCAA championships, right? We had Evan Sheik qualified for the NCAA championships, and it was his senior year, and he couldn't go and compete, right? And that was a difficult thing to deal with, right? We had 6 months of basically complete shutdown, right? Like we were not allowed to see our athletes, be with our athletes, do any of the things that you would normally be doing to develop them, move them forward, prepare them for the next season. We had to get really creative at that time, and basically, we did spent 6 months of doing online workouts and showing them to the guys, and there was a period of time where they couldn't get into a gym, right? Wow. So I had to go kind of old school, and it was it's good. I think about kind of my background and some of the different people I've trained with in different environments. What comes to mind now is, John Cook and Evolve, right? My time there, a lot of the training we did, it wasn't about, grabbing a barbell and things along those lines. They made sandbags, sleds, any functional thing you could find, and you grab it and you go train. And so I was putting some videos together for my guys where, go out and find a big rock in your backyard, and we're going to pick up the rock, and you're going to squat it. You're going to push it. You're going to press it over your head. You're going to carry this, and this is how we're going to get workouts, right? And because in my mind, if you're not moving forward, you're never staying still, right? Like this is just you're never staying still. So if you're not trying to move forward in some fashion, you're moving backwards, right? And it's an unacceptable thing when you're trying to compete at a very high level, when you're trying to, we're asking our kids to go out and compete against Iowa and Penn State and, the best of the best, right? So, when we're preparing for that, when we're trying to do that, we have to be on our game. We have to be finding the best ways to train. We have to be finding the best ways to move things forward. And so, we spent an entire 6 months like that, right? Like we couldn't get together at all. Right, and that's a rough thing. And then when we came back under a whole different set of rules, right? Like the kids had to be masked, they had to distance. It's hard to wrestle and distance. So we spent our whole preseason, which didn't start until normally starts when you get on campus. And this is back, we're looking at 2020, 2021 now. You know, we had to, you know, like we didn't even get started really until November. And then when we started, you know, we're having these kids shadow drill for an entire month.
Yeah.
You know, we're not practicing drill moves, anything, right? But we had to get creative, you know, and you know, and we had to come up with stuff that, you know, under the conditions and circumstances that we were at, that could have them as best prepared. And then we dealt with the season. I mean, there wasn't even really a season. I mean, we ended up having 5 matches.
5 matches?
5 matches last year, right? And we can only compete against one team at a time.
Okay.
Right? And it was up in the air on week to week. If we were 1 week before our season, and we did not have a schedule last year. We had Kent scheduled, and we had Ohio scheduled. And we were waiting for our conference schedule to come out. And our administrator was supposedly working on this, right? And then our conference came out with the schedule, and our administrator said, you can't do that. You know, because they scheduled 2 weekends of tries and quads. That's what the conference did. And our policy at Cleveland State was we can only compete against one team at a time. And so they said, you guys can't do your conference schedule. And, you know, I'm talking to Josh the whole time. I'm like, we got to have a backup plan. We got to have a backup plan. And fortunately, we were reaching out to other coaches and saying, look, depending on what happens, we're open to competing any given weekend. You know, we'll come out to you, you come to us, we got to figure it out. And we were able to get 3 good quality teams on the schedule, West Virginia, Navy, and Central Michigan. And it all worked out. And in those settings, I mean, what we decided to do was, you know, we decided to basically have like a kind of inter-squad tournament setting sort of thing, right? Where, you know, because we're all sitting there thinking, like, how do we have – our guys are going to wrestle 5 matches, and then we're going to have our conference championships. They're going to wrestle 6 matches in 2 days potentially. That's, you know, we have to give them something more than that, right? So you're always in the mindset of – what are we doing to prepare our guys, best prepare our guys for, you know, their ultimate goal, right? What we're really shooting towards, right? And, you know, those conditions, you know, weren't really allowing us to do what we had to do. So, you know, but all teams, we brought, basically what we did is to every event, we brought every guy that we could that could wrestle, and we paired them up as often as we could. We tried to get guys 2 matches. It usually worked out 2 matches per guy per event, right? So, we're going into MAC conferences. Our guys got 8 to 10 matches.
Really?
Yep. And then we're having our conference championships, which, you know, that was the entire goal last year. Last year, it really is kind of crazy that we're here and dealing with this to the extent we're dealing with it today. But last year was, you know, we were still at that point where, you know, I mean, really, honestly, like most things were still shut down at that time. Schools were largely shut down. And,
yeah, absolutely.
You know, a lot of, as far as the NCAA goes, wrestling and basketball were the first sports to get back in action. And so, you know, we're figuring out as we go along. And the whole goal within, you know, the collegiate coaching ranks is we got to get to the championships, right?
That's the goal.
That was the goal. We got to get there. However, whatever that takes, however you do that, we got to get there. And we got there. We got to the MAC championships. Things went well there. I mean, we had a good tournament. We were in the top half of you know, the conference where we finished. We were missing 2 starters. You know, they were close contacts. They didn't get COVID. They were close contacts, and so they you know, they weren't allowed to go to the conference championships. Which, you know, anytime something like that happens, you know, you really feel for the kids. But even in that those circumstances, we were right there in kind of, you know, the top tier of the MAC. You know, which is big for Cleveland State. Cleveland State has been struggling in wrestling for a long time. We turned that around a little bit these last couple of years. And then, you know, and then we got to the championships. We qualified 3 guys. We got out there. And again, that was a bizarre experience. No fans, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it really was. You know, the protocols that we had to follow once we got there, they split the tournament into 2 different segments. You know, one half wrestled, and then, you know, then when they were done, the other half came in and wrestled and things on those lines. So it was just a whole process last year of, like, you know, being creative, right? Being innovative, figuring things out, being willing to, you know, be flexible and you know, and make something happen for these kids, right? Because, you know, and it ended up, I thought that was a real success. You know, we ended up having that tournament. There was no COVID outbreaks or anything like that. we got tested every single day that we were out there.
Wow.
Every
day.
Every day. Every person that was considered a tier 1 individual, coaches, staff that was going to be on the floor, the wrestlers, in the morning, the first thing we did was we got COVID tested 6 days straight, right? Wasn't one positive case the whole time. So,
That's a success there, right?
Yeah, I mean, it worked out great.
And
we had the tournament, and it was, it was great. I think people were really relieved to be able to tune into ESPN and see, kids and people out there competing again.
It was so, I think, important just for everyone involved to because it made us feel like some sort of normalcy again, right? And it brought that back. And, that's so important. I jumped into this so fast, I didn't even get to give you a proper introduction. I apologize. So Clint and I, Clint was always 2 years ahead of me. Clint was always someone that everyone looked up to when we were at the North Akron Wrestling Club together, followed Clint to Walsh Jesuit. Clint was a 4-time state finalist, 3-time state champion, NCAA finalist, 2-time All-American, and obviously countless international. Clint is now the assistant head wrestling coach at Cleveland State University, and he's also coached at many other colleges around the country. Clint also is a very unique individual for the fact that at one point in time, after college, went out and was living you were in New York City, weren't you?
I did. Yeah, I lived in New York City, worked there for a couple of years.
And you were working where in the stock, were you on Wall Street?
Not technically on Wall Street. We were up the road a little bit in Midtown Manhattan, but I was working at a Wall Street firm in Sands Brothers in New York City as a stockbroker and investment advisor.
So
right
you were a stockbroker and an investment advisor right out of college. So
I was.
You go to Penn State, right? So what led you to Penn State? Why did you go to Penn State? You could have went to any college in the country, right? Why Penn State?
Penn State was doing kind of everything that I wanted to do in my college career at that time. Obviously, Iowa, was still the big dog. I would have thought about going to Iowa, but quite honestly, they didn't show any interest in me. So
they didn't.
No, they didn't. They didn't. Everybody else, but not Iowa.
No,
right?
and you were, and back then it was different than today. We didn't have all these rankings. It wasn't like, but you were considered one of the top one or two kids in the weight class coming out, right?
I think they were primarily recruiting the other top one, right?
Okay.
It was kind of me and Chad Kraft that were coming out. We had been opponents. We wrestled each other, in 9th grade to
Did you?
Yes, to qualify for our cadet world team.
Okay.
And we competed all the way through high school and all the way through college. And they were going after Chad Kraft, and they ended up not getting Chad Kraft. He went to Minnesota. I was getting, I kind of, boiled mine down to Iowa State, Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. And, what it really came down to, because, all those were great institutions. They had a lot of really good things going on. I knew guys on all those teams. With Ohio State, I had the feeling of, I love the state of Ohio. I love Ohio wrestling. I wrestled with a lot of those guys on national teams and things like that, growing up and going through high school and stuff like that. Ultimately, Jimmy, our other teammate and good friend, chose Ohio State. And, so I had all that kind of thinking going through my head. And it really is an interesting process and decision. And it's not an easy one. It's tough. But what Penn State had going on, they were the up-and-comer, right? Like, they had Kerry Collette. Like, right. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, like, Kerry Collette was the man, right? Like,
absolutely.
And rightfully so. Like, phenomenal athlete. And I got to train with Kerry through the years, and man, that really just helped me so much as a wrestler and now as a coach today, because I learned so much from him. But the Hughes twins, Sanshiro Abe, Kerry McCoy, just like, and like Josh Robbins, he was a stud from Ohio that was there, an NCAA finalist, and just a whole crew of guys that, their team was phenomenal. They actually should have won the national championships that year, our senior year. They were projected to, and had things played out like the rankings were set up, they would have won, but they didn't play out that way. Sean Nelson was there. He didn't make weight at the Big Ten championships. You're looking at a potential finalist there with your 118-pounder. A couple things like that happened that hurt Penn State, but they were runner-ups right behind Iowa. But everything that they had going on there, they were the up-and-comers, right? And I saw that, and I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to train, with the best guys in the country. I wanted to be a part of a team like what we had in high school. I had big goals for myself as an individual, but I wanted to be a part of a team that was competing for an NCAA championship every year. And I thought Penn State gave me that best chance at that time. Plus, Happy Valley is a beautiful place.
Yeah.
So really great, awesome campus. Really awesome people around there too. So just everything, everything about it attracted me.
It attracted you. And you saw the opportunity also to kind of, make your own mark in a way and help take a team to the next level that was up and coming. And, you saw it, why go join the team that's at the very top already when, you can bring those skills? Because when I think back to and everybody always talks about between you and I and asks us, who's the greatest Walsh team ever, right? How many times we get that question?
Constantly. Even still to this day.
Still to this day. And without the leadership of Clint's, team and Clint, we wouldn't have been able to achieve the success that we had, the following year. It was Clint, it was Jimmy, but Clint was more of our vocal leader. Jimmy led with actions. He didn't talk as much. Clint was the one when we were in practice. If we were not giving it 100%, Clint was the person who would call us out and make sure, because Clint was pushing everybody to be great and not just himself, right. And that's what makes you such a special leader today. And I see you doing it at Cleveland State. You're pushing everybody else to get to that next level and take you with. So without Clint, we don't have the 95 team. And you learned, you were pushed. You came into the room as a freshman and you saw what it was like. And I imagine it was the Marcus Molikas and, those guys showed you what it was like to lead, right?
Oh, absolutely. We all have our role models, that we look up to. Those guys that once you kind of, I don't know how this happens for other people. I don't know how it happened for you, but, I got the bug for wrestling, right? And, I loved it, right? I fell in love with it. I wanted to be the best. That was kind of, the motivating factor of my life for quite a while through my teenage years and into college. And it was a great motivating factor. It gave me a really good thing to look and shoot for, right? And in my mind, all right, I wanted to look at what the best guys were doing, right? And I wanted to copy that. That's really, I think, what it's all about, right? Yeah. I mean, we're kind of innovating some things along the way. Without question, you pick up some things, but at the very basic level, you take a look at all right, man, look how that guy is awesome. I want to be like that guy. What's he doing? And Marcus Mollica was one of those guys for me. I really admired Marcus, and Alan Freed was another one. He was, at the enemy over at St. Ed's, but I mean, I just admired everything that he did, how he carried himself, how he went about his business. Marcus was the same way. So yeah, absolutely. When I'm looking at okay, what do I need to be doing? I'm taking a really close look at Marcus Mollica, right? And what a gift, and we were. I mean, hey, blessed is the word, really. Yeah. I mean, we were blessed to have the people around us that we had around us. I mean, I would go into a wrestling room every day, and I get to, Marcus was probably, he, if not the number one guy in the country when he was a senior and I was a freshman, he was one of the top 5. Right. And I get to be in the room with that guy every single day.
Every single day.
Right. And I get to see what he's doing. And I get to try to emulate that, to the best of my ability. Right. And I guess, it's really interesting. Maybe I'm just kind of a loudmouth. Maybe I'm just, I don't know. I'm not exactly sure. You mentioned that I was kind of the vocal leader of the team. And, I guess that's just kind of innately how I was. Right. It wasn't just, I wanted to succeed, right? I wanted to do very well individually, right? But, I loved my teammates. I loved my friends, my boys, you know what I mean? And right. I wanted us to do the best and be the best, right? And I guess I knew through experience, I mean, maybe partly intuitively, but through experience, right, that, if we're willing to push ourselves at a certain level, if we're willing to work at a certain level, watch out, man. Nobody's going to beat us, right? And so, I don't know. I guess I've kind of always been that way, and it's never really stopped. I think you could talk to a lot of my athletes that I coached, and
If they're listening today right now, they're saying, yeah, Coach Musser hasn't changed at all, right?
Yes, he's not afraid to say stuff. So.
But you need that. You led by action out on the mat, but you also, and that's, when you graduated, that, and I loved our 95 guys too, but we didn't have those seniors like that. You know what I mean? Like I love Scott and Jamie and Joey O'Neill, but those guys weren't, on us like that, like, pushing us to, hey, when we were running those sprints, in those moments where you can push yourself to a level you didn't think you could get to, but maybe you need somebody to help you do it. Right. So we did.
Absolutely.
And that was so important. But, so you go and you go to Penn State and you make that choice and you guys are on the up and, you go to Penn State and, so you wrestled as a true freshman. You got thrown in the fire. You weren't expecting to wrestle at first, right? You thought you were going to redshirt.
Yes, things kind of unraveled,
okay,
right, at Penn State a little bit right after NCAA championships. Like all these guys that we thought were going to be there, and we had the number 1 recruiting class in the country.
Number 1.
Yeah. My team. I mean, it was phenomenal. Like Glenn Pritzlaff from New Jersey, 3-time state champ, Fargo national champ. John Lange from New York, 3-time state champ.
Wow.
Multiple time. I mean, I don't know if he ever won Fargo, but he placed high a lot. Biff Walliser, legend out in Pennsylvania.
Yes.
And then Eddie Jane,
And then Eddie.
up at St. Ed's.
Who I had to, unfortunately, get pounded by a few times, yeah.
We all knew that Eddie was an absolute beast, right? So we had, we had the number 1 recruiting class in the country. Penn State, what they had coming back was a whole lineup of guys, right, that were phenomenal. And so the plan was that we would redshirt and then we would work our way into the lineup, our entire class, basically. We were going to, but, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but, so half of those kids, half of those guys were gone by the time the next year came around. Like, there was a lot of partying that went on up at Penn State. Right. And, and I'm not exactly sure what happened before I got there. I know what happened and what, I participated in when I got there. But basically, all these guys became ineligible at the end of the year. Some so much so that they had to leave school. Kerry Collette had to transfer out. He had no chance of getting eligible back at Penn State. He had to go to Lock Haven to do that. The Hughes twins were both ineligible to start the next year. And so, half the team, got wiped out right there. And so that changed the plan pretty quickly when we all came in as freshmen at Penn State and went from all of us redshirting to all of us wrestling because we were the guys. We were the guys in these weight classes and stuff like that. And so, but I was fully prepared for that. It didn't kind of faze me at all. I was like, all right, so I just get started on this now, right? And,
yeah.
And I agreed to something probably, as a young kid, you really, I'm excited. I'm excited to wrestle at Penn State. I'm excited to be in the lineup. I'm excited to work towards being an All-American and a national champion. And I was going to start the year at 142, and the schedule was that John Hughes was going to get eligible as returning All-American from the year before, one of the top-ranked 142-pounders coming back in the country. And that he would come back at the second semester, maybe start at 150 and then come down to 142, and I would drop to 134.
Whew.
Yeah, it was a horrible decision. It almost ruined my college career. It was actually, very close to ruining my college career. But I thought I could do it. And that's part of, I think as a super high competitor and somebody that wants to achieve, I wanted to achieve. There's a level of arrogance in there. And I certainly had that. I had.
Well, yeah, you were the bravado king. I mean,
I like that.
Don't challenge. If you say Clint Musser can't do something, he's gonna prove you wrong. He's gonna do it.
I had a lot of that mindset.
Yes.
I absolutely did. And I really did. I absolutely believed that I could do anything. And in that kind of thought process, and it's good. It's good. But I didn't have a really good source to check me with that, right? To try to keep maybe that within some boundaries and that sort of thinking, got expanded out into other areas that really hurt me in my life and stuff like that. And and this was, I mean, I wrestled at Fargo that summer at 143. I weighed in at 141, and I said, I felt really good. So I'm like, I can make 134. I can do that. I can do that. And I'm excited, and I decided to do that, and it was really bad. I mean, it was really bad. I could tell you all kinds of stories. For the Big Ten championships, I spent 9 hours cutting weight, in a sauna suit, in a sauna, riding a bike, like, on and off for, it had to be 8-9 hours straight, right?
How much did you have to lose?
I was down to, I was around 140 when we got out there, but I was bone dry, right? I was bone dry when we got out there. I had nothing left in me.
Yeah.
And so the coaches dropped me off. Weigh-ins were like 4 or 5 p.m. They dropped me off at, we were at Indiana. It was Indiana University. Around 8 a.m., maybe a little bit earlier than that. So I started cutting weight, got the sauna suit on, started going through the plan and the program that I was doing. I worked out for an hour and a half, and I lost 1.2 pounds. I was at maybe 138.8, okay? And I was like, that's it. Like, I can't do that. I'm not making this weight. It's not happening. And so I made a beeline for the water fountain.
Did you?
I did. And our coach, Coach Oishi, who I love dearly, absolutely love, he taught me so many good lessons. And we called him the Green Dragon, man. This guy was like magical. Like, he literally like popped out of the blue. Like, like, where did he come from? I get to this water fountain. I put my hand on this water fountain, and there's Coach Oishi right at, like he just popped out of nowhere. Like, where'd you come from, right? And, his nickname for me, and, God only knows why, this was my nickname, was Big Head, right? So he said, he goes, Big Head, what you doing? And I'm like, no. Because, I mean, if he would have been there 1 minute later, I would have been about 10, 15 pounds overweight, and that would have been it. There would have been no even trying to make the weight, right? But he got there, said, come on. And he actually did kind of what he does, like some sort of magic trick on me. He took me out to the van. He's like, all right, I want you to sleep. You lay down, you're going to sleep here for a while. And I'm like, I'm okay with that. Right? He showed back up. He had a pound of Gatorade, a banana, and a cup of hot tea for me. And I'm like, perfect. I'm all about this plan, right? Slammed that Gatorade, ate that banana, and then started drinking that hot tea. He said, we need to get you some rest and some energy so we can get a good effort in here and get your weight off, right? And then the hot tea will help warm up your insides and, give you kind of a little bit of a caffeine boost. And he was exactly right. So, I mean, I was right back up to 140, but I did have that little burst of energy. And what we always did back in the day was you got your heart rate up quickly while you had your sauna suit on, right? Mm-hmm. Just to generate that sweat. And then what you did was you just kept going. You just kept the sweat rolling once you got the sweat going. So we went in there, I did a bunch of sprints, got the sweat going, and then I was in and out of the sauna, in and out of the showers with the showers on for a long time with this sauna suit on. And I finally, it's time to weigh in. I'm pretty much delirious. I believe I'm like crying half the time. I remember a wrestler from Michigan, Jesse Rawls, telling me to shut the heck up, and I'm getting pulled off of the bike. I'm getting put back on the bike, pulled off of the bike, put back on the bike, and we go check weight, and I was a pound over, right? And I'm like, okay, I can do this. Went and threw the sauna suit back on, did the rest of the work. Long story short, finally made it. Not without some serious drama, but I was in a place where so I'm literally delirious. I went over to the Ohio State, where the Ohio State guys were.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes, I walked over to them, and it was actually Jim Jordan, who was an assistant coach at that time. And, I lay down, I go, Coach, I'm ready to go. And Jim goes, Clint, your team's over there, right?
Oh,
And I thought we were in Wisconsin. We're walking outside. I said, oh man, this is nice weather for Wisconsin this time of year. They're like, we're at Indiana, Clint.
dude, that's kind of scary to think about.
It was bad. It was bad. And then, and then the next day, and this is how it was. After I would make that weight, it wasn't always that bad. But it was always pretty bad to make the weight. And I had one good match in me, and that was it. And the match that I had, my first match was against returning All-American Frank Lacone. Wrestled him real tough, lost in overtime. Put me into the consolations, and then I'm sitting there by myself between matches, and my whole body starts cramping up, right? Mm-hmm. Like my arms start curling in, my legs start, and I'm by myself. Nobody's around me. I'm kind of in a secluded place, and I can't extend my arms and I can't extend my legs at all. My match is coming up, and our coaches are looking for me, and they finally find me. Like Coach Uishi finally finds me. He's like, oh, he starts grabbing my arms, pulling my arms straight, rubbing them out, pulling my legs straight, rubbing them out, and by the time I had to step onto the mat, I finally was able to extend my arms and legs, and it was like I was in junior high again. I'd never wrestled like that in my life, since I was, up 10 or 11 years old. It was bad, right? It was this back and forth match. The kid was a backup 126-pounder from Indiana. Just because we were in Indiana, their 34-pounder didn't make weight, so they put their backup 126 in there.
Wow.
Right? And I literally like throwing lateral drops and rolling guys through, like junior high stuff. I mean, if somebody has a video of that, I'd love to see it. The match ended up being something like 19-16, something along those lines.
Wow.
And what really hurt me, and really what was tough, was my coaches accused me after that match of throwing it, so I wouldn't have to make weight the next day, right? So they came out, they said that to me. It was already kind of devastating enough, but when they said, I mean that thought, there's nothing even remotely close to a thought like that has ever entered my mind. Right?
Never.
And so when they said that, it really devastated me, and I almost didn't come back. I went back home, and like I did at that kind of time in my life, and this is another part of my story. I mean, I just drank it all away for the next week plus. I went from weighing 134 to like 167 in a little over a week period of time, and boy, I looked like the Stay Puft Marshmallow Boy.
Did you really?
Yeah, it was bad. And and family and friends talked me into going back, but that hurt me. That set me back a lot. It really did, and it took me a little while to get my mindset back where it needed to be. To compete really, at my best in Division I, right? So yes, that almost that almost completely ruined my career.
I'm
glad
thinking,
it didn't.
Yeah, and to think that, and put myself in your shoes, and have my coaches question my will.
Yeah.
How devastating.
Yeah.
How that could just kill a kid's confidence, right?
Sure.
And you go and you self-medicate and drink to overcome it, right? Because you're sitting there and I mean, you're a super successful, people have never been on the mountaintop that you've been on in life. I mean, to be able to say that you were the number one person in the country at what you do, coming into Penn State, not many people in the world today could ever experience that. Nobody's really seen that type of success. Most people, and then to have people question you, I just can't even imagine that. So that, and I can see why. I would probably do the same thing. I just go, but that's such a challenge. So you ended up going back. You made the decision.
Yeah.
Why? Why'd you go back?
Well, I think it was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And mind you, I've had time to process this stuff, and and I love my coaches, right, dearly. They were great coaches, right? But we're all flawed human beings. There's no one among us that gets everything right. And I understand, why they thought what they thought, right? Like I do. I didn't then, right? And I honestly, I didn't have the skills to verbalize it, right?
Right.
Or really any skills to actually process it and deal with it in a good, healthy way emotionally, right?
Right.
Like going and getting, completely wasted for a week straight is not a good way to process things.
No.
And I've always had good, we have been blessed to just have good people around us. And, people in my life knew that I wouldn't be okay if I wasn't, trying to work towards my goals in wrestling. And, whenever I kind of ran into obstacles and hurdles like that in my life, I had those people there to encourage me back. And they did. And it was tough. And getting back into it was tough too. I mean, I had a mindset there where I didn't want to be there for a while. And that truly affected me. That more than anything, it affected my development in my career over the next couple of years, right? Where it was automatic for me to be doing whatever training was going on, and then going above and beyond that. I got to a place where I'm just showing up to do what I do the minimum, right?
So you're going through the motions.
I spent a year, I redshirted the next year, and an honest assessment, I was absolutely going through the motions for that year and a half, right? And that showed up in my next year of eligibility, which was my sophomore year. And I came back and I just didn't make the improvements in the areas that I needed to improve. I mean, I was a top 10 guy. I was ranked 7th, 8th, 9th most of the year. Took third at the Big Tens, won some matches, all that stuff. Won some good matches throughout the year. But when it came down to, I went 2-2 at nationals and didn't place, right? For me to think about being in college, that was 3 years being in college, and I had not been an All-American yet, or really made a national championship run. If you would have asked me if there was any chance in the world of that happening prior to going there, it was absolutely not. No, I'm going to be, in my first 2 years, I'm going to be All-American, and I'm going to be pushing for a national championship. That was 3 years down, and I still am not an All-American, right? And, so, and it's really interesting. And this is, I've obviously kind of observed my own career and also a lot of athletes that I coach. I mean, when you're trying to succeed at that level, you got to be on point in all areas of your life, right? And part of my arrogant attitude was I thought, I can do what I want on my time, and then I'm gonna work hard. They asked me to work my tail off, right? And I still and I can't say that my whole sophomore year I was going through the motions, but what I wasn't doing was I wasn't mentally engaging in those critical areas that I really needed to improve on, right? And those were the little moments where, I lost my first round match, right? And I lost it in overtime because I wasn't on point in all the areas that I needed to be in. And that gave gave a window of opportunity for this kid that I probably beat every other time I wrestle him, right? In that critical moment, that tough first round match of the NCAA championships, right? When you're trying to be the best, you've got to be invested in it, right? It's got to be, 100% your focus. There's very little room for error, because inevitably that extremely tough moment is going to come. And the question is, in that moment, are you ready for it?
Yeah.
Right. And if you're not, if you don't know, mainly right here, that I have invested absolutely 100% of myself for this moment, right? And I'm rising to this occasion, the moment will pass you, right? And that's what had happened. And, and that put me into the consolations. I won a couple matches in the consolations, and I lost a tough match, I think, right before the blood round, maybe, round of 16, something like that. And that was my season. So I'm 3 years in, and I'm just like, how did this happen, right?
Where did this time go?
Right.
And Clint is someone who's experienced success. He won a state championship as a freshman in high school, beating a guy who had beat him earlier in the season, correct?
Yep.
It went into overtime. Was it double overtime? Or was it your state championship as a freshman?
Yeah, back then they didn't do double overtime.
Okay.
We basically wrestled a mini match for overtime. So regulation was 3 2-minute periods. Overtime was 3 1-minute periods, yes. And it was Carl Grove, and he was a returning state champion from the year before, a senior. Yeah, nobody
No one.
No one had me winning state championship, my freshman year.
I'll never forget it. I woke up in the morning. The first thing I did is run out of my room and ask, because that back then we had to depend on the newspaper the next day.
Yeah.
So I run out of my room. I'm in 7th grade. I'm like, did Clint win? And I look at the paper and I'm trying to find the results.
That's awesome.
And you won. I think. Did you hit a 5-point move?
It was 17-10. The only points, this was interesting. The only points that he scored in the entire match were on escapes and stalling points. I scored 17 points in the course of the match, and I was one stalling call away from getting stalled out of the match. So,
whoa.
Which
how's that even happen?
Well, that's this is where you get into your officiating and integrity in there and things on those lines. I mean, there's no he hits me for stalling literally as I'm taking Grove to his back in regulation, which I'm hitting a fireman's on him. I'm getting called for stalling, right? So, who knows? Was that But I do know this. My dad said if he would have called that last that last stalling call, I'd probably still be locked up today, son. I was ready to jump over that edge. Right?
Vern, he was going all, and I get it
totally. Yeah.
So the reason I bring that up is because you're someone who understands what it is to rise to a moment where no one thinks you're going to win,
right?
And you believe in yourself maybe when no one else does. Here you are 3 years in at Penn State, and you haven't sniffed your goals yet, and not even got close. So you're going into now your junior year, right?
Yeah.
What's your biggest challenge at that point in time? What's holding Clint Musser back from getting to the next level?
Well, what happened at that time is I did some soul searching at that time, and I would have benefited from seeking out some maybe more wise counsel, right? Because I think we're all limited in what happens in between our own ears, right, and the conclusions that we come to, right?
Yeah, isn't that the truth?
But in my mind, I knew that I could commit more. In my mind, I knew I could do better. I went and told my academic advisor, I'm like, because my grades were really good at that point. I maybe still had like a 3.4 or something like that, and I was doing well. And I told my academic advisor, I'm like, I got to put, I said, and this is, what was I, 2021 at the time? I mean, like, I think about this thinking, and I'm just like, wow, this is just bizarre. I told her, I said, I got to put more focus into my wrestling, so my academics are probably going to suffer, right? Like those two things had to happen. But, in my mind also too, at that point, alcohol had, just was continuing to play a more increasing role in my life. And, and quite honestly, to a large degree, didn't completely take over my thinking, but certainly was influencing it, and I knew when I said that, I knew that I'm going to be doing some partying while I'm wrestling, right? So probably my academics are going to be the thing that suffers here right now, as opposed to saying, look, I got to eliminate, this excessive drinking and things like that I'm doing in my life. That wasn't happening because it had already become too important to me. But from a training standpoint, I said, I got to pick it up. Like I got to step up my commitment. And I really did. And one thing that was really awesome at that time was Kerry Colat was making his Olympic runs, his world team and world and Olympic team runs in his career, right? So, he's preparing for the world championships, and he's right up the road at Lock Haven. And I wrestled him that year, and he embarrassed me, man. That was a humbling moment going out and wrestling Kerry Colat in front of 7,000 people in Rec Hall, right? But I mean, he was right down the road, and he's going to be training all spring and all summer long, right? And I'm like, all right, I'm going to be Kerry's training partner, right? And I was, and I did, and I drove up to Lock Haven. He'd come down to Penn State. I'm on the mat with him, 4 times a week, right, through the entire summer, right? And it was phenomenal. And in that sense, I stepped up my commitment, right? And in my mind too, I felt like I had to change how I was training a little bit. looking back to my sophomore year, I was undefeated going into the second semester, right? And again, in my flawed thinking, I thought, I'm overtraining, right? But really what was happening is, I would try not to drink during the season, or at least minimize it as much as possible. But there was inevitable times where, I just go out and I'd go out on these benders, right? And, when you're training on a high level, when you got to be mentally focused, physically disciplined, that just doesn't work, right? Like my body wasn't repairing the way it needed to repair, right? I didn't have the focus that I needed at certain times. And that wears on you on the course of a long, intense NCAA Division I Big Ten season.
Oh my
right?
goodness!
So like the second semester, I think I finished the year like 14-13 in the second semester, 15-0 to start the year off, and like 14-13 on the back half of the year, right?
Really?
Yeah. So, I thought I'm training too hard too early, right? And there was something to that. We ran a ton back then, and there's just no reason to run as much as we ran. I mean, like we were like a marathon team, right? So I was going to change my training up a little bit. I went up in a weight class. Again, I don't think I put together the best plan, but I from a standpoint of being hungry and wanting to train and wanting to win, that was there, right? And and it started to show. I had a really good junior year. I had a stretch where I won 23 straight matches. I was ranked. I don't know if I was ever ranked number 1 in the nation. I think I spent most of the time being ranked number 2 and number 3. And ended up finishing 5th at the NCAA championships, which again was a disappointment. I think I made some mistakes going into those last 2 weeks. I was actually, because that's crazy. Yeah. So that was the year where the weight classes changed.
Okay.
They changed at the middle of the year. So I decided to wrestle 150 that year instead of 142. And that was the year that kids died cutting weight. Mm-hmm. And they changed the rules right in the middle of the year.
I was 98, 99.
Yep, 97, 98.
97, 98.
Yep, 97, 98. And so in the middle of the season, they changed all the weight classes. So 118 became 125, 126 became 133, 150 became 157. And if you had wrestled at that weight class already to that point, you couldn't go to the next weight class down. Like 149 would have been, 150 was easy for me. Like I wasn't making a big cut. So I was already an average size 150 pounder. So 157, although most of the guys had already been wrestling there, but some guys had not. And guys that would have wrestled 58 ended up going down and wrestling 157 that year. So I was, wrestling some big guys. And so for me, like I lifted really hard all throughout the year, which is something I've found out is the right way to go about training during a wrestling season, right? And I've implemented, and it's really, you see like all the best guys. I mean, they're just strong and powerful, mm-hmm. right? So when we used to just run and just be in amazing shape, like now that's shifted a little bit. You still do that. You got to be in amazing shape, but you got to be powerful. You got to be strong. You got to be durable throughout the entire season. I kind of discovered that year, right? And so for me, I was taking creatine while I was lifting, and that helped me keep a little extra weight on. For some reason, I got advice from a strength coach, and this guy was really good, and so I had no reason not to believe him. He said, then the last 2 weeks after Big Tens, just be off the creatine. I should have stayed on it because I couldn't, they did an experiment at the NCAA championships that year. So we weighed in once, right? That was it. Only one weigh in, right? It's not good for a smaller or an average size guy in the weight class, right? And then what they did was they checked our weight again before the semifinals round, right? I go into the semifinals round, I'm weighing 161, and here I'm wrestling Chad Kraft again. He's going into the semifinals round. He weighs 176, right? So Chad Kraft is tough, right? Already when we're the same weight, when he's got 15 pounds on me, it's a little bit of a different game. And when you're talking about a game of literally inches and centimeters, it's tough. And I ended up losing that match, I think 3-2 in the semifinals, and then ended up coming back and taking 5th. So, but started working. Those goals started to happen, right? But still not to where I was capable of, and
so you have focused so much on your training, changing things up, figuring out, okay, this isn't working, I need to do this and this. And the entire time though, it's like the elephant in the room is maybe I'm drinking too much, I'm partying, but that it's like, well, I can't eliminate that. Like
Right.
that's always, that takes, and let me ask you this: how many NCAA championships do you really believe in your mind you would have won if you weren't drinking?
I can't say I would have, but I've been much more competitive
Yes.
for at least two. Right. My junior year and my senior year, absolutely. My sophomore year would have been tough. Kerry Collette and Roger Chandler, and that, and even at my very best, beating those guys would have been tough. But there's no question I should have been in the top 5, top 8 for sure that year. So I was ready to be an All-American my freshman year too. I placed at Midlands. I'd beat returning All-Americans. Yeah. It's just like you got to be at the top of your game and you got to be dead focused, right? Like you're going against everybody else that's the best, and they're all looking at that same goal, right? And there's some guys that are 100% dialed in, and there's some that aren't, and the ones that are dialed in are the ones that get that, right? And and that's a good segue into my senior year because that was my last chance, and we'll just throw it out there. So I'm a recovered alcoholic now, right? What I didn't realize what was happening fully, I kind of knew to a certain degree was that my drinking, my alcoholism was really kind of taking over my life, right? And for me, the way it expressed itself was like it's becoming more important than this thing I've dedicated my life to and wanting to be the best at. Right. And like you said, you saw me, before those years, right? You saw me when I was focused, a straight arrow, like on point. There was very little holding me back. Right. And I had the tools, I had the ability, I had the mindset and things along those lines. Well, this thing's coming in and, kind of taking over. Right. And that's really what addiction is. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Addiction steps in and becomes the most important thing, and pushes out all the other things that are really important. And that's the other part too. I was at that. Slowly but surely was pushing out family, pushing out friends, and it really is. It's really kind of. It's amazing how it happens. It's amazing how it happens. But that's why addiction's what it is, right? It's it's just a powerful thing that kind of takes over your mind and your body and leads you to things that you never really ever could have imagined, that you would do. And that was happening, right? But wrestling really was keeping me afloat, because of my passion for it, because of the goals that I had set, because of my teammates that I had around me, things along those lines.
And they loved you. Your teammates loved you. They're like brothers.
They absolutely did, and I love those guys to this day. We got a little group chat that we still stay on, and it's great. But I kind of often think about this, and I wonder what would have happened to me had those guys not been around in some of my low moments, right? They were there. They were there to lift me up. They were there to protect me. So I love those guys. I love those, and I always will. They're a great group of guys. We had such a great group, man. That was half my motivation too. Was I didn't want to let those guys down, right? But yeah, get into my senior year. I spent a whole nother summer training with Kerry Collette. He's maybe a world silver medalist by then.
Wow. He
had his experiences, and I'd encourage anybody to go watch his podcast of his story. He talked about officiating. That was back when. The governing body, it wasn't UWW, it was FILA, and man, they were corrupt, and they robbed Kerry Collette of world championships and an Olympic medal. They literally rescored his match on video at one of the world championships that he wrestled. He wins the match. Country protests it. Iran, I believe. They rescored on the video, and they changed the result of the match, right? Another one, I can't remember if it was the Olympics or if it was the World Championships. They made him re-wrestle a match. I mean, this is like unheard of stuff, right? So it like what was done to Kerry was unbelievable, right? And that really hurt. I mean, that took a toll on him, obviously, as well. But I got the opportunity to train with him, and and I was wrestling great. My training was great. I stayed at 157. We had a really good team. We had a team that had a chance of a national championship going into my senior year, and I was dead focused on it. And I made a deal with myself. And at this point, like, I'm at a certain degree becoming honest that, like, the way I drink, what happens to me when I take a drink is affecting my ability to accomplish these goals. So my deal that I was going to make with myself was, at a certain point, I'm going to be done drinking, right? And that point came, and I drank again. I said, that doesn't really matter. Then the next point came, and I drank again. Then the next point came, and I drank again. Then the next point.
Did you keep making deals with yourself, like new deals?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. And there would be a couple weeks, there would be periods of time. But inevitably, and you can call this, the pressure getting to you. You can call this things on those lines. In the back of my mind, when things got like that, I had an out, and I knew what it was, and that was just to go drink, right? And it actually ended up resulting in a series of benders over the next couple months, leading up to the national championship, all the way. I lost in the finals of the Big Tens. I went on a bender for a couple of days, right? Here's one of my teammates steps in. He literally comes down, grabs me up by my shirt, smacks me in the face, says, "We got nationals next week. Get yourself together. Let's get focused." And thank God, I don't know what I would have done, just sitting there and kind of in my own stuff, And then even all the way up till just a couple nights before nationals, I'm pacing in my room. Everything's running through my head, every possible scenario, this and that and the other thing. And, there I am sitting there, got my seat at my home bar, and bartender going, "Pressure getting to you?" And I'm like, "Just give me a drink," right? And I closed that place down that night, and I'm getting ready to wrestle in, the biggest tournament of my life in a couple of days, right? And so really, here's what happened. So I had a good term. I wrestled really well. And, this year I had Chad Kraft in the semifinals again. We had to weigh in again, so we're the same size. And, again, battle like it always was. Love competing. I want to say this. I love all the guys that I competed against, right? It was just awesome. The guys I trained with, the guys I competed against, we battled against each other. We had that animosity towards each other during those times. But, those are the people, they pushed me and made me better, right? And I know I did the same for them. So, there's that respect there, right? And Chad and I wrestled, and it was an overtime match. And I won in overtime this time, and I made it to the finals. And I wrestled another guy that I wrestled a bunch through high school and college, Casey Cunningham, who's assistant coach at Penn State now, ironically enough. And what happened was I'm there. This is the moment, right? 20,000 people in the stands. I'm looking at my coaches. They're looking at me. And I'm getting ready to run up on that stage. And I got doubt in my mind.
You did?
I got doubt in my mind, right? I instead of this is the moment, I'm going, this is mine, I got doubt in the back of my mind, right? And I know why that doubt was there, right? That doubt was there in that moment. Just because of the way I'd been living my life, I don't know. Could I have won that? I should have won that match.
Should have won the match regardless. I remember the match.
Right.
Yeah.
You look at the match and maybe if that thought isn't in my mind, do I win the match? But that's the thing about those moments. And that's why championships don't just happen. It's not an accident, right? It is absolutely earned. Right. And I think that's a lesson that we need now so bad. Right.
So true.
You're not given anything. You want something, or, if people look at these athletes that are phenomenal and do amazing things, and just the talent of that athlete. No, I'm sorry. There's so many years of dedication, commitment, sacrifice, just everything you can imagine, right, to get to that moment with the other tools that are absolutely needed, right? So in that moment, I had that moment of doubt. And even so, the match was very close, a little bit controversial, I think you'd say. And, but the bottom line was, at that time, in that moment, I was not up for the moment, right? And I finished second in the NCAA championships, which a lot of people would look at that and say, that's awesome, man. Congratulations. You had a great career. You did a great job, right? In my mind, and this is part of the thinking that takes over an alcoholic, right, or an addict. In my mind, I was a failure, like instantaneously, right? I went back in the back room and wept, and I had guys come up, try to console me, teammates, guys I had wrestled with on, USA teams before and stuff like that, and I just couldn't hear any of it, And in my mind, and what I told myself was, you didn't deserve it anyway, Clint. You're a failure. And that's the type of thinking that kind of started to take over my life at that time. And really, that's when that's the beginning of my descent into like alcoholism, right? Like I didn't draw sober breath after that day for the next 6 months, maybe a day or two, maybe one day or two. In that 6 months, I didn't get bombed, right? And when I should be, that's the beginning of my life, right? Like
right.
I'm graduating, I'm getting a good degree from Penn State. I've had this great career. I feel like my life is over. My teammates, everybody else, they're going on their job interviews. They're, preparing for their next stage of their lives. Some guys are getting ready to train. All those opportunities were right in front of me, and I let every single one of them go by. I had a chance to go to train at the Olympic Training Center. I had a chance to coach at Arizona State or West Virginia or Penn or even Kent State, let alone like some of the, professional, interviews. My counselor, and I love her too. She's another person just amazing that helped me out so much. She set up several interviews for me, and I didn't show up to one of them.
Why?
Yeah,
Just
so this, that's the exact question. Like, why? It doesn't make any sense, right? But this is the type. This is what happens, right? My downward spiral was on, and really, kind of what happened. I knew I should have been training. I knew I should have been. I was on the ladder for the Olympic team. At that time, my decisions that I made caused my coaches not to send me out to Vegas for the U.S. Open, which I can't blame them for that. I wouldn't have set myself as a coach. I should have been coaching at a D1 squad. I had the opportunity to actually coach at Penn State. That came late, and I just let all of that go by. And just because my thinking had gotten so low, and this is what happens. Basically, the alcohol takes over my thought process, right? And what happened next was I proceeded to live a life that would match up with my drinking, right? And whatever would not be too hard on me, so I could drink the way I wanted to drink, still make money, things on those lines. And that's not a good way to live, right? And that was really when my downward spiral started happening there. And for me, it happened relatively quick. I got some pretty serious consequences along the way, and by God's grace, didn't hurt myself worse or anybody else worse than what happened, and finally got to a point where I got to a point where I had to do something, or that was going to be it.
That was going to be it.
I was at the point of, I'll just tell you real quick, 2006, this is 3 DUIs into it, multiple lost jobs, public humiliation, and just all of the chaos that goes with it. And the best thought in my mind that I have, and I'm forced to not drink, so I'm actually not drinking at this time. I'm actually dry. And the best thought I could come up with in my mind was, Clint, you know what? Everybody, you and everybody else around you would probably be better off if you just weren't here, right? And so I was beginning the thought process, and the idea I had in my mind was I was going to get a bus ticket, Greyhound, and end up get to Mexico and drink myself to death. I watched the movie Leaving Las Vegas many times at that point, and when I envisioned my way of going out, I was going to do it like Nicolas Cage, find a place and just drink until I died. That was the best thinking I could come up with at the time of my life, without having one single drop of alcohol in my body, right? The thing that forced me I was looking at a year in jail if I messed up my probation in any way, right? Thankfully, a couple things happened. Some people I knew from my previous experiences in recovery. One particular individual reached out to me out of nowhere, out of the blue, and this is God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, Frank. I was lost on my own. I was gone. And he listened to me, and he just listened to me. He listened to me tell my story, whine and cry 45 minutes, and then encouraged me to do what he knew that I knew could help me get better, right? That was a big moment, right?
Huge.
That helped me make the choice to go face my consequences, do my 10 days of jail, do my short treatment program, and then start taking the steps that I needed to take to get better, right? And that started my journey in recovery, and that was back in the spring of 2006.
And it's so, yeah, you had a choice, and you could have went one way or the other, and by God's good grace, you had the opportunity, and you met someone, and they helped you.
Yep.
And they helped you see something and get to a place, and here we are. It's 2022.
Yeah.
What, 16 years?
It'll be that this spring. So it's May 31st. That's my sobriety date, May 31st of 2006. So I'm 15 and a half years now, and going on 16. And
it's amazing, Clint. And Clint has helped me so much. And we all are fighting battles that other people don't know about.
Right.
We're all being challenged. This 6 inches between our ears can be a really dark place, right, for a lot of us. And I've been there, and finding my faith. And Clint is just somebody that I respect so much. He's such a champion. He's always been there. He's always been a leader, and it's just so awesome that he can go and inspire and share his story and help other people now that are doing the same thing. Let me ask you this. Being a coach now, do you have kids now that like on your team and stuff that you help, that you work with, and that are dealing with these same challenges, and you're able to support them maybe in a way that we never had a coach, or you didn't have a coach to help you with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's been actually part of my really mission, getting back into coaching. But just to touch on something a little bit there, like at that, like I just couldn't reach out for help, right? Like
why?
My pride was killing me, right? That thing that that attitude that I talked about earlier of like when I can do anything, like like why can't I fix this, right? And that's just not how it works when you're talking about alcoholism and addiction. You basically got to give up everything, all the thinking, not all the thinking, but a big part of it that you relied on before to be able to get better, right? And the big thing was, asking for that help and accepting that help in my life, right? like almost to the point where, I'm ready to check out. I will not accept the help, right? And I just think that that's such a big attitude that so many of us have to get over, right? Like, if I didn't get over that, we certainly wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation today. And an amazing thing is no matter how dark you mentioned, yes, the space between my 2 ears was the worst neighborhood, the worst space for me to be in for a long time, right? And it can still, get that way from time to time today too. The important thing is to exercise and do some things to help you get out of that, right? And I just couldn't get out of it at that time in my life on my own, and just thank God for the amazing people that were there to help. And people listening to this, you may be in that spot yourself. It doesn't have to stay the way it is, and there is help out there, and there is people that understand, right? And can help you get from where you're at now to a place. Listen, at that time of my life, I couldn't imagine. I had no hope for a good life. I really didn't. I thought I've messed this up beyond repair. I don't know. I don't know. I don't see how I could ever have a good life again, right? And that's my thinking, and my thinking's limited, right? And God sees something much different, right? God sees something much different. He sees, and just like you said, not only did he see a better life for me, he saw how my experience could flip around and become a great asset in my life, right? And not just an asset for me, meaning through my own experience, I'm able to help people in ways that I never could have before, right?
Absolutely.
And I've been able to do that with athletes that I coach. I've been able to do that with, guys that I trained with, growing up, athletes that I coached later on in their life that are adults, athletes that I coached against, as well as, current athletes to this very present day. It really is something else. The example living through it, getting to a point in your life where you can see no good, and then just doing a few things, taking a few steps, being willing to accept a certain attitude about your life. And quite honestly, seek out God, really. I sought out God for the first time.
The first time, the legitimately going all in.
Really sought God, right? That all that can get flipped upside down on its head, and that everything that I told myself in my mind, every narrative about myself that I believed, at that point, get completely smashed, and have something completely different, right? And to be able to speak to somebody that's in that moment or in a moment like that in their life in a very honest way, in a very, when somebody's looking at you, and this is one of the things that helped me, and they tell you, I know what you mean, Clint. I know how you feel. And then they can express the time in their life they felt exactly that way. It's just extremely powerful, right? And that's that human connection too that I was lacking so much at that point, right? That really is just such a powerful thing. I heard a really good quote the other day from Martin Luther King. He said something about, I sought my soul and I couldn't see it. I sought God and something I couldn't find it, but I sought my brother and I found all three, right? And that's a powerful thing, right? Yeah. When I was brought together with these other people, I started finding myself, started finding my own soul, had the opportunity to search and seek and find God, and then rebuild my connection, that I had lost for a significant period of time in my life. And honestly, quite honestly, that's the best experience that I have. God's given me an opportunity. It's a little bit of a saying, I guess it's kind of a life motto, is that, kind of my real purpose today is to fit myself for maximum use to God and my fellow man, right? And that takes various different forms, right? And as imperfectly as I go about doing that today, I'm able to go about that in all the areas of my life. And today it's a full life. We live right down the road here in Hudson, Frank. I can tell you that I never thought that I would live in Hudson, right? Or maybe I had some prejudgments about it, whatever, but I love this place. It's a great place, and got a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful children. I've had the opportunity to get back in to the sport that we love, that I love, and bring something additional to it, right? Like wrestling isn't ever going to change. It's always going to be really tough, and it's always going to present like amazing challenges to the athletes that engage. And that's one of the things that's such a great sport. I mean, you talk about character building, right? You talk about overcoming adversity. You talk about resilience. You talk about all these things that we're finding out are such critical things in life today. And you couldn't have a better sport for it, right? But I'm coming at it today with a little bit of a different approach and mindset. Than maybe we grew up with. Not that it was bad. I love every single one of my coaches, right? But maybe there's some areas where we can, sand down the edge a little bit.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And, and so, just the opportunity and also just, being a member, my church, being in a recovery community, things on those lines, I have the opportunity to live that out, and it's not perfect. That's what we make mistakes, but but the opportunity to learn and grow and really just, I guess really it comes down to this, growing in the image and likeness of my Creator, right? It's really hard to put into words what that journey is like, and really how grateful I am to even be able to have the opportunity, and how different life is now versus what I experienced in the past. So
man, it's your purpose, and it's why you're here, and and you're so. I think it's such a phenomenal. Just your life experience. I mean, you have life experience that most people don't. You've done so many things that most people have no idea what it's even like to experience. The good, the bad, right? The highs, the lows. But you can help people in a way that is truly on a different level, and it's so important, and it's needed, and it's special. But the challenge today is, I think, like you said, people want to go at it alone. Like they think they can do everything by themselves, and they're not open to receiving. And like I'm still like that in ways. Somebody wants to help me move. Let's say I'm moving.
Right.
No, I'm gonna go do it. No, why? Like I think in life you got to be open to receiving. It's one of the most important things there is. Would you agree?
I absolutely agree. And I get wise guidance from just amazing people, men in my life, and one of these individuals says I have to still remain a patient, even though maybe, I've had, this period of time of this recovery in my life, I have to continue to be a patient. I'm not the doctor, right? And that's a tough thing. That's a tough thing,
yeah.
Right? To this day, I still have problems asking for help in certain areas. I'm just like you, Frank. I'm like, I could maybe call up some of my wrestlers, and I think they'd probably be happy to come over and help me move some of this furniture. But, I'm a strong guy. I can pick this couch up by myself. And, it's just, it really is something else. And, and in certain areas, I have to check myself. I really do. And, I'm thankful to have a set of tools that I use in my life, to check myself on those things and bring myself back to, what's the word? Reasonableness, I guess, in some cases. It's, prayer, faith, connecting with other men in a way that's not work or not, sports or whatever. It's, on a spiritual level, things on those lines. and all that stuff's very powerful in helping along those lines. But we're all works in progress, right? We're all works in
We're all
progress.
works in progress,
And,
man.
when we get to that finish line, I guess my hope is, well done, good and faithful servant, right? Like,
That's it.
and I can promise you I did not think like that when I was younger,
Well, neither did I. But we're all given tools, and it's our job to use them to help others and to make the most of this time here. And that's
Right.
it. And that's what you're doing now. And I'm so proud of you because I see what you guys are doing over there at Cleveland State. Like, no one cared about. I was ineligible my whole career. I don't know. Like, I imagine you're so tuned in now, and you are helping your guys so much find resources to make sure like that doesn't happen.
Right. Well, you can't get that perfect, right? Like you got to have like the participants have to be willing.
Well, I have to be willing, right?
So you're never going to have a setup where you're doing that perfectly. But my mindset that I bring to things today is like I look at and I think about like the effort and commitment I put into wrestling, right? And I ask myself like, gosh, what would life look like if I tried to put an effort like that into all areas of my life, right? Like, how can I replicate that, in all the things that I do, right? And it's not this thing about, patting myself on the back and wanting to be better than everybody else. It's wanting to challenge myself, to see, to be my best, right? And not for the purpose of my own personal ego anymore. But again, this goes into the area of faith, right? But for the glory of God, right? I look at, I've seen multiple examples. I look at people that try to live that way. I look at the results of when I'm working with people when they're making their best efforts to live that way. And I mean, it's amazing. When you put yourself to work on behalf of God and let Him kind of run the show, amazing things happen. Amazing things happen, right? And I try to, I try to bring that to what I'm doing in my coaching, right? Lately's been a struggle. It really has been a struggle. I've had to keep myself above water in this season, really. And and again, I'm trying to bring that to my athletes the best I can every day in the circumstances that we've been given. But look, we say, guys, like, when we show up to classroom, right, let's do our best at that time, in that moment, right? When you're getting ready, when you're studying, preparing for your exam, right, give your best effort, right? When you come into this wrestling practice, give your best effort. Like, let's see what we can do, right? When we come in, all right, and we put our honest, best attitude, best effort, best, what we have, when we bring our best, right, we're giving ourselves the best chance to succeed, right? There's no guarantee. There's never a guarantee that we're going to succeed. But when our preparation level is super high, all right, then, when that competition comes, we're going to be ready as we can possibly be for that moment.
Right.
And one of the things I love about sports, and I, really, love about the challenge of, these guys, they're trying to achieve high academically, they're trying to achieve high athletically, is that through this process, they can really learn what they're capable of, right? And then they can take that and then in their own individual ways when they go out into their communities and their lives and their families and things like that, they're bringing that to everything that they're doing, right? And that's really through my coaching what I want to give to my athletes. And we work on, so I've been, involved in FCA, Fellowship of Christian Athletes work, involved in that for the past several years and really see some amazing things happen there. We want to try to give the athletes an opportunity to kind of just have an environment, a space where they can explore their spiritual natures as well, right? And honestly, and get into the Bible and try to understand some biblical truths, right? And there's been some really good things along those lines as well. So, you think about the person, us as people, I'm not just a physical being. I'm not just a intellectual being. I'm a spiritual being as well. So, let's develop all those areas of our life, right? And that's one of the things that's really helped me become well, I guess you'd say. Be able to fully live my life and try to become, what God wants me to become, is, a good focus on all those areas of our lives, right? I think when you lack one, the whole body suffers. Right?
Absolutely.
And it's physical, mental, we can see that. So focusing on those areas and giving these guys some tools and honestly, some permission. I think some people, are just really hesitant, on some of that stuff. Like, no, it's good for us to pray, right? It's good for us to seek guidance, right? And where can we seek guidance from, right? The Bible, other men, spiritual men, right? Our church, things on those lines, like such an important and integral part of life, right? And we could spend another hour and a half talking about on how that's helped me out in my life.
Sure. But you're doing it, and you're helping these young men you're giving them something that not everyone is giving them. Let's just put it that way. You're giving them an opportunity to grow in all phases. And it's not just about wrestling. Because in 2 to 3 years or whatever they have left, wrestling's over.
Right.
It's on to real life. And you got to live with yourself for those next 40, 50, 60, however many years we're blessed to have on this earth.
Right.
And that's what you're doing. And that's what I love so much. It's the value that you're putting out there and how you're helping people, man. So I'm proud of you, brother. Things are going good for you now, and you are on the right track and really making an impact in the world. And, it's just, I love it. Clint is the premier. Wrestling aside, he's phenomenal, but it's not about wrestling. It's about life. Right. It's about people. Yep. And you're as good as it gets, man. So thank you for coming on the show today. I appreciate you. Let's talk real fast, though. The Rudis documentary came out. You worked with Rudis on that, on Bill Barger. Yep. It was phenomenal. I think everybody who saw it got goosebumps, and it made them relive that. And I just want to thank you, first off, for helping that come together. It was awesome. We celebrated it with Bill.
Yep.
And what's next? What are we going to do next?
Well, the Rudis thing was great, and let's make sure we thank Rudis and Matt Dernland specifically, right? Matt, this was Matt's baby. And Matt's struggling. His health, he's got a long road ahead of him. He had spinal meningitis, I believe, and spent a couple months, severely ill, right? And I think he's fortunate to be alive at this point, and he's got a rough road to recovery in front of him. But his vision for Rudis was that they're going to be the wrestling company, right? So they're going to have the gear, everything like that, but they want to tell wrestling's stories, right?
Right.
And in his mind, he looked at, Walsh and St. Ed's, I think is where he kind of started off with. But through his process of looking at that, he saw a true wrestling story in Bill's story, right? And it was just so awesome. Number one, because he came to me pretty early on my thoughts about it, and I said, absolutely, just let me know what you need, and we're going to make this happen. And he did, and it really was cool to see like how the story that he wanted to tell kind of developed, and really just was kind of, it was Bill's story.
It was Bill's story, and it was so awesome.
And it was awesome, and it was so good to come together as a group. I mean, we don't get together, as old teammates. Individually we do, and we'll see each other here and there, but like to get together as a group like that and celebrate it with Bill, and Bill loved it, right? Like, him and his family, they just, had such a great time with it, and it was awesome. And so,
before we move on, I'm going to put the GoFundMe page into the show notes for this.
Yeah.
So please, if there's anything you can do to help Matt Dernland out there and his story, it'll explain a little bit more what's going on, but he needs our support.
Yep.
especially everyone in the wrestling community.
Yeah, he's got a long road ahead of him. So yeah, if you know, yeah, if you have the opportunity, the ability, yeah, if you could support him and his family, that would go a long way, right? And so now it's really interesting. I mean, all this kind of happened, I think, here in the past couple of years when the pandemic happened. Some people kind of brought up some interest in the old St. Ed's Walsh rival, and I mean, there's so many amazing individual stories through that, right? Like, you know, through each team and how our teams developed, and then what guys went on to do, and you know, who was involved. Like, I mean, it really is.
Yeah, it's
pretty cool, right? I mean, like, what a cool thing to have been a part of, right? It was amazing.
It
right?
really was, and you don't really think about it being in it. You don't, but then to take a step back and remove yourself from it,
right? And so Ben Hada, right, is now, you know, he's gone on and he's
What's up, Ben?
What's up, Ben? my dude, love Ben, love all those guys, really. You know, it was, you know, even with the rivalry though, you know, it's like what I said earlier. It's like, you know, I mean, it's so awesome, you know, that we two groups of people, you know, they're working towards this big goal, working so hard. Everybody's investing, you know. I mean, you know, it's important. Like, you know, we want to achieve something, you know, and we're all driving towards those goals, and then we meet and we, you know, clash like we did. It's just such a cool thing, and you know, it's so great to have those guys, right? Because, you know, I know for me, man, like, you know, my target was St. Ed's, man.
St. Ed's.
Let's get them, right? And so Ben, he's a movie producer now. He did the documentary, the Dave Schultz documentary, Foxcatcher, right? Which, I mean, it was amazing, and what a story there. What a story there.
I just watched it again on the plane ride home from Florida 2 days ago, just to kind of watch it again.
Right.
And unbelievable.
I'm going to have to check it out again soon. It's been a while since I watched it. And then, you know, so a documentary on Kurt Angle, which I haven't seen yet. I don't know. I guess it's not been released yet, but I can't wait to see that. And now he's putting his energies and efforts towards, you know, I think right now, like the decade-long war or something along those lines that we were looking at, or something.
Yeah, the 10-year war.
10-year war,
the
right?
10-year war.
St. Ed's Walsh's rivalry through the 90s, and kind of everything that, you know, led to that. And there's a lot of stories in that 10 years, man. I think
it's going to be insane.
Yeah, I'm excited. I think this is going to be great. I'm looking forward to, you know, playing whatever role I can play, you know, in helping bringing this one to fruition, too. I think it's going to be awesome.
We're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff out there that we probably have no idea, you know, on the other side. They're going to learn a lot.
Yes, and I've learned some stories myself these past couple of years. So.
Yes,
it's good stuff.
Yeah.
You know?
So that is going to be exciting, and I'm excited to work with Clint and Ben, and just to help any way we can to bring it, because we want Ben's the storyteller. We're going to help him hopefully tell the story. So it's going to be exciting.
It's going to be great.
So, but yeah, man, always a pleasure to talk with you, brother, and keep doing what you're doing. And till next time, everybody, thanks for listening.